I want to show you how to diagram appositives. That is, nouns or noun phrases or noun clauses that rename some noun they appear right next to in a sentence. So I've written this sentence on the board, which we will diagram. The idea you mentioned, that Zoltan is unjust, fascinated my cousin Gabor for months. Now, you'll see that there are two appositives in this sentence. The first one I'd like to address first because it's the easier one, and it's Gabor. My cousin Gabor. My cousin is Gabor. Gabor just renames the noun phrase my cousin. And the way we diagram appositives is simply to put them in parentheses. We put the appositive in parentheses right next to the noun that they rename. So, cousin, my cousin, you see there the my descending from cousin, my cousin, and then parentheses, Gabor. And that's how we indicate that Gabor is an appositive for my cousin. Gabor is my cousin. My cousin is Gabor. And that's how you can tell something's an appositive. You can stick an is between it and the thing it renames, and you get something sensible. My cousin is Gabor, Gabor is my cousin, and you can switch them around because they're exactly equal. Now, I've diagrammed what's easy here, that the idea fascinated my cousin. That's the backbone of the sentence. The idea fascinated my cousin. The idea you mentioned, now what is this thing you mentioned? Well, that's a relative clause. It's answering the question, which idea? The one that you mentioned. That's which idea. So we would write that down here. The idea, we would need to have another baseline. You is the subject, and mentioned is, I'm going to get a little traffic jam here. You mentioned, now what we're missing here is a relative pronoun because they can be dropped. And so, in fact, what we've got here is an invisible that. The idea that you mentioned, because that can be dropped in English all the time, or often. So it's actually would be functioning like a direct object. You mentioned that. And we put that in brackets to show that it doesn't actually appear in the sentence. And now I'm going to shorten our little line there. And now we do a dotted line between the relative pronoun and the noun that the relative clause modifies. So the idea that you mentioned, and now we get the second of our appositives in this sentence. And it's this thing here, that Zoltan is unjust. And now we have the idea that you mentioned and the idea that Zoltan is unjust. They may seem the same. They both begin with that. But there's an important difference. And that is that this you can do our little my cousin Gabor test on. The idea is that Zoltan is unjust. That Zoltan is unjust is the idea. The idea equals that Zoltan is unjust. But you can't do that with this thing. You can't say the idea is that you mentioned. That's the idea. Well, that isn't the idea. And similarly, you can't say that you mentioned is the idea. Well, that makes no sense at all. This thing is an adjective. It's functioning as an adjective. But this thing here, like all appositives, functions as a noun. And so we need a pedestal. That Zoltan is unjust. So what we do, we make our pedestal, and we put the base of the pedestal in parentheses to show that this is an appositive. And what do we have? Now it becomes quite easy. Zoltan is the subject, is, and now a nice little subjective complement, unjust. So this is a predicate adjective there. And now the only thing missing is the that, and that's an expletive. That is, you see it has no place to sit on this baseline, whereas the relative pronoun does have a place to sit, and namely it's the direct object, but there's no place for the that, and that tells us that it's an expletive. And so we build it a little penthouse here, a dotted line ascending from the verb in the nominal clause, and of course this is a nominal clause. That Zoltan is unjust. And there we have it. There we have a sentence with two appositives. One very simple one, just the name, Gabor, and this rather more complex one, the nominal clause functioning as a appositive to idea. So I'll just stand back and show you the whole beautiful diagram.